This podcast is intended for adults only. We do not condone the use of any illegal substances, and anything we consume is for educational purposes only.
Because, we should be afraid of a plant that grows from the ground. And, endocannabinoid system is, it's in your body and it produces cannabinoids. I mean, you know what? I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna rant. Just play the music, Mitch.
Whoa. Yeah. Gato. Yeah, I got my hoodie on, now peep the chest as human catalyst. Downtown Chula Vista, on 3rd Ave where I go cop some shit. Fuck a thief, so fuck zoomies, yeah, they whack ass.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Canna Kuyas podcast, where we are cultivating conversations concerning cannabis, culture, and creativity. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Mitch Narito.
And I am Eric Esteban, and on today's lucky number 13 episode, we are going to commemorate and celebrate this favorite stoner holiday that is coming up. And the anagram? Is it the anagram of?
Yeah, all the numbers are the same forwards and backwards.
4/20/24. So if you're listening to this when we upload, it'll be on Wednesday today, because we're recording it live on Wednesday today. It's our first one we recorded live in a minute because we've been doing the StreamYard and doing interviews and stuff, but we're back to live. And I thought that we would, on this special 13th 4/20/24 episode, we should share our history and the history of this plant that we love to talk about, and the history of cannabis.
Cannabis. Before we continue, one of the things we're gonna file a little disclaimer.
Another one.
Yeah, another disclaimer. This is our podcast. It's just nothing but disclaimers. But Eric and I are in no way, shape, or form historians or expert in the history of cannabis. I am looking up stuff on Wikipedia right now, so you could blame Wikipedia if any of my information sounds off. And
you can blame me if any of my information is off, because I go straight up off the dough. But but this is our research and the stuff that we've, like the stuff that, because I'm so curious about this plant, and I'm so curious about, the history of this plant and the history of its use as humans and its development, because I grow my own, so I just like the history of the plant in and of itself, just the plant biologically. So I'm just interested in that. So I'm always interested in the point of this podcast is to share our knowledge and share our information. So whatever we can impart to our listeners is kind of what we wanted to do in our goal for this episode. So, like the cannabis plant itself, like you researched on Wikipedia, mm-hmm. and also I've watched numerous documentaries where it talked about how it started in Central Asia, or like Afghanistan and in China, and all the different, not really fully certain as to exactly the region, but it's in that Central Asian, in the mountains, and why it's so diverse. And it started in a place where it grew in the mountains in Asia, but it also grew in the fields and in the in the forests. So yeah. it was an adaptable plant. And
it's a very hardy thing.
I mean, it was part of every religious ritual in China. Part of their the emperors were buried with it. There were then the plant, I guess, traveled to India, and in India you were reading about how it was basically part of the religion, and Shiva, right?
Okay, so instead of drunk history, this is high history. Eric.
This is high history. This is high history. Exactly. See, this is good. That's another good disclaimer. Yeah. Because, guys, we harvested the Gelato 33, and we smoked some sugar leaf joints before we started. So that's part of why this is high history.
So, yeah. So we're going to go on a little journey, everybody. So The history of cannabis and its usage by humans dates back to at least the 3rd millennium BC in written history, and possibly as far back as the pre-pottery Neolithic B, which is 8800 to 6500 BCE, based on archaeological evidence. For millennia, the plant has been valued for its use for fiber and rope, as food and medicine, and for its psychoactive properties for religious and recreational use. And like Eric was saying, it is believed to have originated in China, but hemp, which would be, I guess, it's where like the same family.
It's all like hemp, cannabis, the cannabis plant, like indica, sativa. All these are just all names for the same seed, basically.
But pretty much from and we're condensing a lot of this just for time's sake. But cannabis,
and also because we're just starting our journey on this history. You know, we're probably going to have another history of cannabis where we've learned more, or we might have a guest that knows more. And but at the end of the day, this is our first, and we're still just on episode 13 anyway. So
so this is our cannabis history for now.
Correct.
So it says here cannabis has been found in Japan. So they used to cultivate it in Japan, China, Korea. It was used heavily in Hindu culture. It says here cannabis is believed to be consumed by the Hindu god Shiva and has been part of the Hindu practice and culture. Hemp is called ganja in Sanskrit, so that's where we get the term ganja from. Ancient Greeks and Romans, as well as Assyrians, have been documented to use it. And so it goes back a very long way. In terms of spreading globally, cannabis as we know it was first consumed as hashish, which is cannabis resin, and that started back in the Persian and Arab world, and then it moved from there, and it didn't start becoming a thing that you smoked until the 1500s, which came with the introduction of tobacco. So up until the 1500s, hashish was consumed as an edible.
And also they used it in oils, because even in the Bible, they talk about how there's a specific translation of the Bible where it talks about how, I think it's cannabum or cannabis or some form or derivative of the word cannabis in the Bible, where it refers to like all the different holy oils and anointed oil, like frankincense and myrrh. Well, there was also cannabis in that oil. So it's always been a part of a lot of different spiritual and even just traditional practices.
Yeah, there's a lot of use for that's been documented in native cultures and almost all the cultures where cannabis has been present. There's always like a spiritual aspect to it, where it's a sacred thing, or it'll take you on a journey, or it kind of provides you with like out of body experiences where I guess you get closer to whatever deity you would be praying to,
or even closer to the earth.
Yes.
If you're not praying to a deity, you're just trying to connect with the Mother Earth, and how just from down to the roots. And I mean, for me, I have to share, I'm not necessarily a very religious person, but in as far as spiritually and what's the word, holistically, okay. I would say,
yeah.
I feel that a connection to this plant even more since I started growing it. And I think like we can talk about like the history of how it came to this country, because I know you talked about how it went from the colonial, and the Spaniards and the Europeans who were trying to colonize America. Mm-hmm. They brought hemp with them, in as far as what you were talking about with how there's so many different uses for hemp, because they used it to build their sails and
so clothing, ropes. Some people would eat it just for sustenance.
Sure.
But yeah, so like it, according to a lot of the stuff that we've read up on in the last 10, 15 minutes.
For you, speak for yourself. I have been studying. I've not been straight up. I've been reading books on this.
That's
like
cool.
I've read a lot of different books. Like Cannabis is Medicine is a very good book by Bonnie Goldstein. Is a great book. But then there's also I can't remember the name of it now. But one of the comedians from the show in Chicago sent me there's a children's book that talks about the. Explaining how this is just a plant. And, so I almost thought about doing that as a Instagram video where we read the book and, like a Mr. Rogers kind of,
like a bedtime tale.
Yeah.
But so what else? Cannabis was introduced to the Western world by William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, who was studying Western medicine, and then he was living in India, and that's where he discovered it. And he wrote of a bunch of therapeutic uses of cannabis, including cannabis stopping convulsions and seizures in children. So around it was pretty much up until the 1900s where it was pretty prevalent. It was well documented. People were using it. But then around the it's always been stigmatized because from what we've read. Someone has always had like an issue with the consumption of cannabis. A lot of people believe that it makes you lose control.
Well, that's the point of Reefer Madness, the movie that criminalized, I should say, the movie where Reefer Madness. That's the name of it's in the title. It causes you to become crazy or lose control or become violent. Or in the case of with Roger Aislinger, when it was the same time, causes your wives to leave you for brown men. It was all fear and scare tactics. And when you really look at it, it was managed by a cat who owned a paper mill that used trees and was tired of competing with the hemp paper.
Because hemp grows faster, it's more sustainable.
And it lasts longer.
It does?
Yes, because guess what is printed on hemp paper? The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all of the founding father documents were, again, and we could talk about the founding fathers and how, George Washington grew hemp for his, toothaches. And
there is one document that was printed on human skin. We'll let you guys try to figure that one out.
What the hell? Why you got to be so damn creepy? Why you got to be so damn creepy with human skin? There was no American document printed on human skin except for whatever Necromonicon book Mitch is thinking about.
But it's funny you mentioned Reefer Madness. So Reefer Madness did not come out until 1936. Mm-hmm.
But Aislinger quote came out in 1937.
Yeah, so
and marijuana was criminalized in 1937.
Yeah, so that was when stuff started to kind of
the power of propaganda, man.
Yeah, because up until that point, from what I understand, people were not happy all the time with the use of cannabis, but people weren't they were trying to restrict it, but they hadn't really been successful up until that point because people were still using it. But then somewhere around the early 1900s, that's when the propaganda machines or whatever.
It's funny because I was in my recent research of this, I found out that the medical, the MDA or whatever, the place that regulates.
I was gonna say MDMA, but that's not right.
No, that's not right. But I can't remember the acronym for what it is, but the Doctors Association and or Pharmaceutical Association at the time during the 1800s and early 1900s was against natural medicine because it was more the chemical derivatives and the things that they could manufacture and sell versus these natural things that you could grow in your backyard. So that it was a competition. So they pushed medicinal marijuana out, and then the demonization of it commenced after that. So it really, yes, Roger Aislinger and Reefer Madness and all the propaganda was what solidified and finally criminalized marijuana. But when it boils down to it, and it, obviously pharmaceuticals, we all benefit from some pharmaceuticals and chemicals and the modern science all the time. It's not like, pharmaceuticals are necessarily bad, but it was bad in the way that it pushed natural medicine out. And now we're in the time where humans are becoming more enlightened again and researching. That's part of why we're doing this podcast is to understand the history of this plant and understand that humans have been using this and benefiting from this plant and almost evolving with this plant. Because when you throw in the fact that the endocannabinoid system was only discovered in the 90s, and that's a part of our biological system. So it's been a part of our bodies for a long time since before we evolved. So who knows? We really don't. We're only scratching the surface when we're talking about any of the stuff we know about this plant.
So pretty much since the early 1900s, scientists and what have you started doing research, and they started discovering some of the things you were saying. Like in the 1940s, they discovered CBD, which is cannabis. I can't say it. Cannabidiol? Sorry.
Let me see.
Yeah.
It is CBD.
CBD. It's CBD, but like, how to
where is it? Does it? Because all I know is CBD. I don't know what it.
Cannabidiol.
Oh, cannabidiol?
Cannabidiol.
Okay.
Cannabidiol? Well, yes, you can.
Okay, yes,
anyway.
yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Sorry, that we're not gonna edit that out because that's
no. You should. We again. This is the beginning of our journey on learning about cannabis.
I know, and one of the most important things about learning is being able to pronounce things. And I am failing.
But you know what you're doing is you're practicing your cold reading skills, and they're flawless, by the way, my friend.
And I'm learning.
Yeah.
So 1940s, they discovered CBD. 1970, the U.S. introduced the Controlled Substance Act, and it says that cannabis has no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. So that's pretty much what listed cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a Schedule 1. Just like cocaine and heroin and that all that. And actually, I believe psilocybin is still a Schedule 1. I'm not sure if it has been descheduled yet.
And then, yes, like Eric was saying, in the 90s, that's when people were able to break down like specific compounds in cannabis. That's when they discovered the endocannabinoid system and what that, how that reacts and how that works. And then in the early 2000s, that's when they started using it more for medical purposes. And that's when they discovered, like in certain cases, such as like seizures or convulsions, schizophrenia, cannabis can help alleviate things. Like that's where like the actual medical side is.
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about, you said the 2000s, right?
Yeah, so it's still relatively new.
We're still very, very much in the infancy stages of trying to figure out all the benefits from because you're talking about, yes, we've started to break down some of the different cannabinoids, right? But they're cannabinoids that are in our bodies and in this plant and in different cultivars and strains of these cannabis plants. Because that's the other brilliant part about it, is when you throw in the fact that it evolves to its environment. It's almost a colonial plant in and of itself, where it can live in the mountains, it can live in the desert almost, it can live indoors, it can, there's so many different places where this plant can grow and thrive, and then it adapts, and then the stuff that when you smoke it or when you inhale it or when you ingest it, the effects, the tastes, the smells are different with each different region. Like they talk about in wine, they talk about a term called terroir, where it's the ground or the environment and the atmosphere and the climate and everything that makes why the grape tastes the way it tastes for that certain wine, right? That's the terroir of the grape. So what they're a lot of more what's the word? More connoisseur cultivars, people who cultivate cannabis that are more connoisseur. Like they talk about the terroir of Humboldt County and up north, where it's this little pocket of mountain air, but then it's also cool enough. But
is that the green triangle that everyone talks about?
Exactly. And they talk about that being once, because it's still the wild, wild west when it comes to the legalization and regulation, especially here in America, because it's still not federally legal.
It is.
And so it really does boil down to, it sucks because part of the decriminalization of it is the demonetization of it. Like we talk about, we've used that term before, and I think now I finally pronounced it properly. But but being real, like being able to growing your own is, I think if you smoke it every day, you should be growing your own. Is basically the mantra for me for this podcast.
I can see that. It's just like, if you grow your own vegetables, you're doing that. I understand why people go to the supermarket or the dispensary because of the convenience, because sometimes it's a lot of effort. Sometimes you just want it, right? But yeah, like I do believe that people should have that option if this is something they want to cultivate on their own, if they want to, make it and suit it to their tastes, why not? In addition to all of this, since Eric and I are both Filipino American, we were trying to figure out what the history of cannabis use and the actual Philippines was. And from what we found, originally cannabis, no one is for sure who introduced it to the country, but there's a lot of evidence that points to the Spanish, the Chinese, and Indians bringing it to our country, either that be through trade or just Filipinos going out and coming back and bringing this back with them.
That's that's part of our culture even nowadays. There's so many Filipinos go work in Saudi or go work in India or go work in China and then go back home and bring back their spoils back home. So I'm sure that there was times where they brought back spoils and there were some cannabis seeds in those spoils.
But the thing that's so different from the U.S. to the Philippines is, I think what makes the Philippines so much more restrictive is that anything derived from hemp, is illegal. Like whether that's just the plant itself, it could be CBD, THC, anything related to hemp or a derivative of hemp is illegal. So there's like a zero tolerance policy in terms of that in the Philippines. Now,
is that recently, or is that always been the case?
That's pretty much always been the case. I think we've mentioned this before that the Reagan era was the just say no era. And at that time, it was the first Marcos in power, and
who was empowered by Reagan.
Yeah, so there's a lot of there's a lot of corruption.
And also, let's be honest with the whole. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So it all boils down to the 80s were a messed up time for a lot of different countries.
Yeah, it says here.
But also coincides with the fact when for a lot of Filipino Americans, Reagan gave them amnesty and gave them citizenship. So that's part of the reason why a lot of Filipinos still remain Republican even to this day. That they always talk about amnesty and Reagan and amnesty because Reagan was smart about doing that. There wasn't always an anti-immigrant party. We'll say it like that.
So the possession of cannabis has been illegal in the Philippines since 1972. However, that law was tightened 30 years later due to the comprehensive Dangerous Drug of 2002 law, which established cannabis as a so-called dangerous drug, and it is considered to be as destructive as the likes of heroin and methamphetamine.
So it's federally, and as far as cannabis, it's the same as cannabis here in America, because right now it's still a Schedule 1 drug. Until they deschedule it, like they've been talking about now, but until they deschedule it, cannabis is the same federally as it is in the Philippines.
And then, so the for possession or consumption of cannabis in the Philippines, it comes with either a hefty fine, a prison sentence, even the possible death penalty, depending on the amount that you have.
Or who's president. Because remember when Duterte was president, that some of them drug offenses, people who were killed because of cannabis. I mean, even, we don't want to talk about the specifics, but Super Psycho Cebu in the movie we're screening on 420, they're here in America on asylum for protection from the Duterte government because of the subject matter of their movie. I mean, it's a trip.
There is some stuff that I did find interesting. So, like, there is legislation, or there are people in the Philippines that are trying to not legalize marijuana, but at least declassify it, or declassify hemp, because hemp would be a huge economic boon to the Philippines, just because it's an environment where they can grow it. And
island culture, you can never beat island sun and island temperature and island humidity and all the different. Just ask Jamaica or any place in South America where it's very humid and it's near to the equator. It's the perfect climate to grow cannabis all year round. So yes, it would be a wonderful place. Or ask even just one of their close neighbors, Thailand, who just recently decriminalized marijuana and
they're rolling all of those laws back, though.
That's because of the election.
Yeah.
So, you can't. The genie's out of the bottle in Thailand. It's going to be very hard. Just in the same way the genie's out of the bottle here in America. These places that still want to criminalize marijuana here, or let me stop calling it marijuana, because I wanted to make sure to share this fact. The word marijuana was used by the guy, I can't remember, the guy who owned the paper mill that originally he owned the paper mills that newspapers were printed on. So he used his newspapers to propagandize and use the word marijuana in replacing cannabis.
Because marijuana was a term used by Mexicans, brown people, ethnics, and it was just othering.
Correct. But marijuana actually is a strain of tobacco that's grown exclusively to Mexico. So it's not even cannabis. He just used that word because it associated people with brown people and Mexicans. And of course, now I want to get to what we were talking about and the theories we have, because these are all, you can't really Google this stuff. You can't really, when you Google Filipino Americans and cannabis or Filipino American cannabis history, there really isn't any.
There isn't. And that kind of, I have complex feelings towards that, because being Filipino, I was brought up, like with Filipino culture, right? Like, and marijuana has always been something that was not cool.
Because you grew up in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, even before, like when my brother was growing up, and my brother's a little bit older than I am, and then with my parents' generation, it's just not something you would do. It's not something, like, it was
mga addict yan.
Yeah, it's straight up. It's like, oh, you got a problem.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
You need something in your life to not do that, right?
Right.
And like, just knowing how it's viewed in the Philippines versus how I grew up out here in Los Angeles, like it kind of brings me down a little bit, because there's like a little bit of my culture or a little bit of myself that I know that I'm very open with here in LA. But if I were to travel back to the motherland, I would have to really like not say anything, because I just don't know how people would react.
Right.
Like I just, like whether or not I'm a good person or not, people would just be like, oh, you smoke? Like, so, like, it's just, it's just like I don't know if I'd be able to connect, you know, like because there's just that divide where I know that I would have like family back home and they wouldn't understand like
Sure.
my choices or my lifestyle or why I do this. Where because like out here it's perfectly normal, right? Like it's legal. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not hurting anyone. Like
Not if nothing else, you're enhancing yourself and you're bettering yourself because you enjoy it. You're opening yourself creatively. You know, all the different things that benefit from cannabis. But part of me also, because of that it's almost the colonial in as far as just say no attitude towards cannabis, and how a lot of the first generation and even people in our generation who don't use cannabis, that's part of why I almost want to figure out and theorize what was the 1930s
or
and
like pre-1930s. Like,
the pre-19 the manongs, because when you talk about the manongs, right, and you talk about, I go back to that Eisner quote.
mm-hmm.
You know, I go back to him mentioning Negroes, which were obviously always going to be a problem for the white man, especially at that time in America,
Mm-hmm.
and Hispanics, right? I'm just going with the quote, right? Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Now, why, in the scope of all the different people, you know, you talked about O'Shaughnessy, right? Was the guy who brought and discovered part of the medicinal parts and aspects of marijuana, right? Back in when he first discovered, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an Irish guy. Why not mention the Irish who are also here during that time? Why not mention the Italians or whoever else? Why specifically Filipinos? So that's part of the question of this podcast and why I want to understand the history of, you know, when I look at the pictures of those manongs back in the day, with some of them with cigarettes in their mouths, was the cigarettes tobacco or was it cannabis?
Yeah, they were farmers. I'm pretty sure, like,
you know what I'm saying
about it,
and
like,
they came here on the boats from Asia and brought seeds with them. So, you know, how much of cannabis culture in the Green Triangle, you know, in the where the manongs really, you know, proliferated and started, you know, in Delano and all these places. You know,
I think it's easy to like. I think it's pretty simple as to why, you know, like those people were grouped together. It's because it was a control thing, right? Like, you have these groups of people who could potentially disrupt something, and like, they're against the norm, right? Like they're doing something different. Like, so you're talking about different ethnic groups. You're talking about creative people. These are people that would just not fall in line with something, right? Like they wouldn't, like if you told them to do something, they would question why.
yeah.
Like, and so
Which the cannabis also helps you to do.
yeah,
It helps you put yourself, put your
introspective.
brains into that, you know, and you, like you said, introspective. And part of the people who are afraid of it and have been afraid of it are those people who I think don't like introspection and self-reflection.
But it's also a thing where it's like it's probably something that was super common, you know, like it wasn't like, you know, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed or whatever. Like this was something that people at the time, you know, they were lower income, considered more lower class or whatever. They probably did it on a regular, and this was just a reason for the cops or whoever to come and police them. You know, like it's an easy way to be like, oh, we heard that this is here, you know, like let's break this up. You know, like it's just disruptive.
The province that your father comes from, where with balisongs.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of talk about how the balisong is illegal here in California still to this day,
Yeah.
right? And that's because some some white rioters rolled up on a Filipino town and they didn't realize everybody had balisongs.
Yeah, no, like there have been cases like, because I know that in cases of like historic Filipino town, like back in the day when there was like like the anti-miscegenation laws and all that, like, and you had Filipinos coming here to like just be manual labor, right?
Couldn't bring their wives.
They were all alone and they had to figure out like this city on their own. And back then, like we would have trouble from the Mexicans because it's just a competing group. We'd get crap from the whites, right? And like you'd get these other groups seeing like these short Filipino guys, because Filipinos are not technically historically they're not tall,
no,
right? So they'd see easy targets and be like, hey, let's go mess with them. And then all of these guys, they knew how to take care of themselves. They crossed the ocean, like they were on ships for weeks at a time, like coming here, and like they had no one else watching their back sometimes, so they had
not
to learn to take care of
mention
themselves.
where they came from. And if they were from the provinces in the Philippines, and then they got to Manila, and then when you think about it, even in the time of our parents, and and how far they traveled and how they got to where they got to, it's an amazing journey, And I think that's the same way with the Manongs. It's the same way with, it's part of why I feel like, sharing their stories is an obligation for us, because we kind of have it easy. Shit, I just moved to LA from Chicago and I was very lucky,
And Bali songs were like, the reason they outlawed Bali songs is because Filipinos were so good at them and they were fucking people up. And they were like, hey, no, we have to even the playing field, even though it wasn't ever level in the first place.
The dance halls, because Filipinos could dance. That's where they stole their wives from, but, and not even that. The quote of Aislinger, where he talks about how Filipinos used cannabis to steal. I would say this: hey, if you wanted to dance with a white girl in that time, and you were at the dance hall, and you, after dancing, you
offered a joint,
shared a joint with that girl, I bet you had number 1, number 2, number 3.
I've never felt this way
ever in my life. Oh my God, you changed my whole outlook on everything.
Am I going home with a Filipino tonight?
I guess I am. No, but but then even when you read the writings of Bulosan and Rizal during that time, there. Can you stop licking the dog? If you hear a licking sound in the background of this podcast,
that's just me cleaning myself.
No, that's just Disco, my dog. Licking. He likes to lick surfaces for some reason. I don't even know. There's nothing there to lick. I cleaned. I just vacuumed. And he's licking.
He's just saying hi.
No, he's being annoying. But it's okay. Yeah, I still love you, Disco. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, but look, we're almost on 40 minutes, man. So like we've been talking about this, and I love that we talked and discussed, at least theorized, that the Manongs and the Filipinos in the 1930s who were demonized for this cannabis probably did use it. So cannabis is probably part of Filipino American history.
I think if we're going along that
hypothesis,
if we're gonna go along there, I can understand why within Filipino culture it was very stigmatized and taboo, because like if you're coming to an area where you don't know anyone or whatever and you're trying to start a new life,
and they were using it to stigmatize you and the plant.
Yeah, they're like, hey, don't do that. Like, we already have it hard as it is. Like, don't make it harder.
Right.
And so, like, if that's the case, then I appreciate, like, all of the struggles that those that have come before me have gone through, so I can smoke weed in broad daylight.
We're literally, right now, at this moment, living those Manong's dream. We just smoked our own homegrown, and all we're doing is sharing the story of cannabis to whoever wants to listen to it. And straight up, like, when you really think about that and you think about the history of this plant, we are living those Manong's dreams.
Yeah, so Let's go to the dance hall. You'll find me with my bully song and a white girl on my side.
Well, you will find us with white girls on our side because your wife is Mexican and white, and
Yes.
my wife is Iowa white. So guess what? We are living the Manong's dream all the way through and through. Yeah.
Screw you, anti-miscegenation laws.
Screw you, Harry Aislinger.
Eric has mixed kids.
Bro, and they are beautiful. And you know what? And in the time of the Manongs, they would have been a crime. And now, straight up, I'm living the dream because it's a dream come true to have my kids. It's a dream come true to have this podcast with you. It's a dream come true to have beautiful cannabis plants growing in my backyard. All this stuff, man. It's a great time, and I'm happy to be here celebrating 4/20/24 with you, my friend.
So yeah, and everybody. So like, I gotta change the way I speak sometimes. I feel like I always start.
You got your little podcast voice. I got you.
Today on the podcast. No, this weekend is 4/20.
Yes.
So we're gonna be celebrating. We're gonna be screening Super Psycho Cebu at a
private screening.
an undisclosed location.
Exclusive private screening in the Garden Studio, which is the secret location unless you know where my house is.
Invite only. But we're gonna be doing that. Like we'll be hanging out. We'll be checking in our next episode. We're gonna talk about Super Psycho Cebu and our reactions to it.
But we will also be talking about another event that we'll be going to at 4/20, which is the One Down Media, where they'll be talking about the history of Filipinos and hip hop, and the idea that they did not include cannabis in that history is we're going to remedy that at that event.
We're gonna include it on the DL though.
Probably on the DL
On the
because we'll be at SEPA. But at the end of the day, shout out to One Down Media for having that event on 4/20, and we're also going to have our event where we're going to be screening the very first Filipino stoner movie, Super Psycho Cebu. And if you want to hear about how that movie was made and how that, you can listen to our past episode. I'll apologize for the audio on it, but if you listen and you maybe turn the volume down, you can listen all the way through, and it's a great interview with Christian and our the filmmakers of Super Psycho Cebu, and you can hear the whole story behind it and how they got here, and the story with Duterte and their conflict with him, and you can hear all that in episode 12 of the Canna Kuyas. And you can listen to all of our episodes if you subscribe and write a review, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, or what do they do on Spotify? Is there a rating service, or
it's stars?
Stars, same thing. So 5 stars on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Write us a review, because writing us a review, and I'm just gonna put that out there because we have our merch. We have our green Canna Kuya logo, our Canna Kuya t-shirts, and we have our Marijuana Ate t-shirts. And I'm just gonna say this: if you've listened this far, you're obviously a fan.
Just DM us on IG, and we can get you shirts if you guys are interested.
But also, what I'm going to say is I'm going to put a challenge out. Is whoever hears this episode and then is the first one to write a review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and then DMs us a screenshot of that review on the Canna Kuya Grow Instagram. If you screenshot your review and it's posted and it's up, and you send it to us, the first person who does that gets a free t-shirt of your choice. So if you've listened this long, you're obviously a fan. So write us a review, and the first person to send me a screenshot of their review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify wins a t-shirt.
And with that, everybody, you have been listening to the Canna Kuya podcast, where we are cultivating conversations concerning cannabis, culture, and creativity. I'm Mitch Narito.
And I'm Eric Esteban. Happy 4/20, y'all.
And to all our Canna Kuyas and Marijuana Ates, stay lifted, stay elevated.
Yeah.
Peace,
I
y'all.
got my hoodie on, now peep the chest, that's human catalyst. Downtown Chula Vista, on 3rd Ave where I go cop some shit. Fuck a thief, so fuck zoomies, yeah, they whack ass jacket shit. Yeah, I move too swift, so I striking silence. Fuck the violence, man, check my mileage, cause I got drive. First tour, I drove 6 states, never thought I'd be there right by my side, man. What a time it is to be alive. See, I'm charged up, feeling energized, build an enterprise, move supersize. Y'all extra like a side of fries. Whoa, false guys who you idolize, yeah, go against us, I would not advise. We the highest in the room, just look up once and you can find us. Our song should have more plays, but we too dope, they rewind us. All my targets lined up, every day my girl get fined up. All my clothes is local, bitch, I really rock designer.
Let's go, gang. Highest in the room, yo, we get fucked up. Hey, you can count on Trey, can't bring the loud pack. Hey, get us in the stew and that's game over. Western Metal Building, that's a home run. Yeah, keep the up or leave the fucker Folgers. Little bitch, I made the beat and dropped the full verse. I just hit a steelo, I got dripped up. Package born and raised, bitch, I got dripped up. Y no se compara. Yo estoy con mi pana, se llama Trega, fumando ganja. Estamos con Cali, fumando en Cali, yo sé que traen ganas. Ella me dice, papi, que terminamos la cama. Highest in the room, yeah, we get fucked up. Hey, you can count on Trey, can't bring the loud pack. Hey, get us in the stew and that's game over. Western Metal Building, that's a home run.
Yeah, we got hits like Tatis and Machado, man, we know you're not a leader. Cause all our moves you just follow, packing big bowls. You know we just scooped up that gelato. Cause I smoke killer, my shirt iller. Yo, ask our dealer, we the highest in the room, just look up once and you can find us. Our song should have more plays, but we too dope, they rewind us. All my targets lined up, every day my girl get fined up. All my clothes is local, bitch, I rarely rock designer.
Highest in the room, yeah, we get fucked up. Hey, you can count on Trey, can't bring the loud pack. Hey, get us in the stew and that's game over. Western Metal Building, that's a home.